Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Got to confess, I got a little frustrated and agitated with that last caller, thinking that somehow there was something inappropriate about the police moving in on that guy and being prepared to use lethal force if necessary when he had already shot and killed and severely wounded their fellow officers. And there isn't anybody alive that doubts that he did this thing. Now, again, before you punish somebody, that's got to be established in open court. That's fine. But just the fact that the trial hasn't been conducted doesn't mean that we don't know that he did it. I mean, there's no question about it. You got all the talking heads on CNN and MSNBC talking about him being a vigilante. They know he did it. He's Denzel Washington. He's a vigilante. He's Django Unchained. This is exciting to watch this Chris Dorner out there wreaking revenge for past injustices. So I get a little bit impatient when we hear from callers that want to tie the hands of law enforcement and keep them from doing their job to subdue individuals like this that are going around killing innocent people. That's why we have law enforcement. And, you know, some people, you can invite them, hey, would you please come in so we can try you and put you to death if you're found guilty. A lot of people aren't going to do that. They're like, oh, yeah, that's great. Fine, lock me up, and I'll be happy to have a trial. You know, they're not going to do it. You got to subdue them. You got to take them into custody. You got to use handcuffs. If they shoot back, you got to shoot at them. So anyway, enough of that. Now, on this sequester business, a couple of things. I want to play the Sheila Jackson Lee clip number 6 because there's a real push now in the Congress to try to get past this sequester, to try not to do the sequester. That's what they want to do. And if you remember, President Obama in his State of the Union speech said that the sequester was Congress's idea. It's the Republicans' idea. It wasn't mine. I had nothing to do with it. That was a Republican idea. So that's the meme that's out there. Sheila Jackson Lee is going to pick up on this, that this whole sequester business, and the sequester, remember, was agreed to in 2011. The sequester business was agreed to as a condition of raising the debt ceiling. Republicans agreed to the sequester. It was President Obama's idea, and I'll get to that here in a second, that if we aren't able to find a way to raise the debt ceiling again and come to some kind of budgetary agreement, then we will bind ourselves to this sequester, which will cut spending and some entitlement programs and the military. Now, 42% of the impact is going to be felt by the military. So the Republicans were chumps to agree with this thing because the lion's share of the impact is coming out of the Defense Department, which is not the problem. And it's not the biggest source of government spending. It's entitlement spending. It's welfare programs. That's $1 trillion a year in those programs. Defense is around $500 or $600 billion a year. So it is proportionally getting hit much harder than discretionary spending. But nevertheless, Republicans agreed to it. And the line from Barack Obama, he said this in the third presidential debate in October. He mentioned it again, that he said in his State of the Union speech, the sequester is a really bad idea, like he had nothing to do with it. But it's his idea. Here's what he said in that debate with Mitt Romney, October 22. The sequester is not something that I've proposed. It is something that Congress has proposed. So that's what Barack Obama, he wants to create this impression. I had nothing to do with this sequester. It's a really bad idea. I had nothing to do with it. Congress forced this on me. They put a gun to my head and made me sign this bill into law. I had nothing to do with it. Blame them. Now, Sheila Jackson Lee, she's ready to do the same thing. Now she may have, she may have some slave blood. I'm not saying she's not descended from slaves because I just don't know. But what I do know is that slavery was abolished in 1865. Well, 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation, 1865 with the end of the war, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. So this whole thing was done. Slavery was abolished, done, finished, buried by about 1870 at the latest. That means in order for Sheila Jackson Lee to be a slave, she'd have to be at least 143 years old. Now, whatever I know about Sheila Jackson Lee, I know that she is not 143 years old. But in this soundbite on the floor of the House of Representatives, she apparently wants us to believe that she is. Let's listen.
This body to be the kind of Lincolnist attitude, as yesterday was the official birthday of President Lincoln, February 12th. And although it was a tragic time in our history, I can assure you that it showed the greatest promise of America when people could come together and do something great. I stand here as a freed slave because this Congress came together. Are we going to be able to do it today to free America?
So, man. So Sheila Jackson Lee standing before the House of Representatives as a freed slave because this Congress came together. She's thanking this Congress, the 113th Congress, for setting her free. She was a slave. Then this Congress came together and they emancipated Sheila Jackson Lee. Now, and Rob, let's have clip 11, the Krauthammer clip, and then the Rand Paul clip number 12 and the Rand Paul clip number 16 ready to roll. Try to squeeze those in. But I want to address this issue directly about who is responsible for the sequester. And the Washington Post back in October 25th of 2012 has a piece by Glenn Kessler. He's like their fact checker guy. And the heading of this piece is Obama's fanciful claim that Congress proposed the sequester. So he's saying this whole idea that President Obama has put out there, that the sequester was Congress's idea, he says is fanciful. That means it's imaginary. That means there's no substance to it. It means it's just plain wrong. So Glenn Kessler, Washington Post, and he quotes Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward wrote a book called The Price of Politics that talks in detail about how we got to the sequester. Here is page 326 from Bob Woodward's book going back to July 26 of 2011. Here are just reading some excerpts from the book. White House Budget Director Jack Lew, this is the guy that wants to be the next Secretary of the Treasury, and White House Legislative Affairs Director Rob Neighbors went to the Senate to meet with Senator Majority Leader Harry Reid and his Chief of Staff, David Crone. We have an idea for a trigger, said Jack Lew. This is the White House Budget Director. He's coming from the White House. He's President Obama's guy. We have an idea for a trigger, Lew said. What's the idea? Reid asked skeptically. Sequestration. Reid bent down, put his head between his knees, almost as if he was going to throw up or was having a heart attack. He said, this is ridiculous. So it comes from the White House. Even Harry Reid says this thing is absurd, hoses it off. Then you go on to page 339, and Kessler makes the point that on page 339 you have the third reference to the White House putting together the plan for the sequester. So in other words, Woodward says, look, there's no question this idea came from the White House. And Kessler goes on the Pinocchio test. I don't know how many Pinocchios he gave this thing, probably 4. Let's see. We've been wavering between 3 and 4 Pinocchios. In light of Lew's decision to double down, we agree it's a whopper. So 4 Pinocchios is I mean, that's an outright, total, bald-faced, absolute, abject lie. That's a 4 Pinocchio. And then he said this is somewhere between 3 and 4. Woodward's detailed account of meetings during the crisis, clearly based on interviews with key participants, contemporaneous notes, make it clear that sequestration was a proposal advanced and promoted by the White House. And then they interview Bob Woodward after reviewing all the interviews because he can't believe what he's hearing from Barack Obama. After reviewing all the interviews and the extensive material I have on this issue, it looks like President Obama told a whopper. That's Bob Woodward saying it. That's the guy that brought down Nixon for Watergate. He says Barack Obama told a whopper. That means a big, huge, fat lie. Based on what Jack Lew said in Florida today, I have asked the White House to correct the record, which, of course, they never have. So even the Washington Post says, hey, the sequester Whether you like it or not, it was Barack Obama's idea. Now, Charles Krauthammer, clip 11 here, says, look, this is a big deal. If Obama can get the Republicans to back off of the sequester, he will complete his agenda for his second term. Let's listen.
And I think he'll try to portray the Republicans, as he did in the campaign, as protecting the rich, protecting the tax loopholes that the rich have, the big corporations, and be willing to cut from Medicare, food stamps, etc. So his position is, I represent the people, they represent ideology. I represent the folks, and they represent the rich. He won the election on that kind of argument. He won on the fiscal cliff on that kind of argument. If he can now win the next round on the sequester, I think he will have weakened and fractured the Republican House in a way that will clear the way to his being the dominant actor in Washington for the next term and completing the agenda he started in years 1 and 2 that the Republican House had stopped in years 3 and 4.
That's Charles Krauthammer says, and you look at this, Rush Limbaugh talked about this yesterday. I read his transcript last night. He says, what Barack Obama does is he comes up with these ideas. They're his ideas. They go into effect because they came from him, and then he campaigns against his own ideas. And that's what Krauthammer's talking about, this sequester, Barack Obama's idea. He's now out there campaigning against his own idea, and the media is so complicit with him, they will not call him on this. They're letting him get away with blaming this on the Republicans. And so, this is one of the things that devious is the only word I can think of to describe Barack Obama. This is devious. It is invidious. It is insidious. It is sinister. He comes up with a sequestration idea. It's his idea, came out of the White House, was advanced by the White House, promoted by Jack Lew, his budget director at the time, and now that he got the Republicans to buy into it, to accept it, to pass it, now he's out there campaigning against it. He is demonizing the Republicans for wanting to go with the sequestration. It's going to kill entitlements. It's going to push the elderly off cliffs in a wheelchair. It's going to put starving kids out on the street. And it was his idea. And the ministers of propaganda in the media, they're letting him get away with it. That's why we need programs like Focal Point to call him on this stuff. Focal Point and AFR Talk back in 2.